Pentagon is being sued by three major U.S. cities, New York, Philadelphia and San Francisco as well, accused of failing to report ex-soldiers who should not be allowed to purchase firearms. Well, the U.S. military is supposed to report felony equivalent court-martial convictions for certain crimes to a federal database. The Pentagon, however, has admitted failing to submit information about individuals who went on to commit massacres. One case is that of an Air Force serviceman who was discharged over domestic assault in November, killed 26 people at a Texas church.
Floresville, this is about 10 miles east in Sutherland Springs at the First Baptist Church. You can see personnel out here.
With phones, video that we talked about, going back.
OK, let's bring in Jennifer Breeden, international criminal law attorney and expert on terrorism. Good to have you on the programme. Thanks for coming on today. As we mentioned, there are three cities, major cities, New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco, suing the Pentagon over the failure to report convictions. I'm not aware that this has precedent, this particular case, unless you can correct me. I mean, do you think they have a strong case here at all?
Well, there are a couple issues going on here. On the facts itself, on the merits of the case, they do have a strong case because the Air Force has admitted that some of their lower officers are in non-compliance with current federal statutes that say they have to report when there's a criminal act by a military serviceman. Not only has the Air Force admitted that, but some other departments of the military, such as the Army, the Marines, and the Navy, they have stated there are failures on their parts and some of their lower servicemen to report these crimes to the FBI for the National Gun Registry, things like that. So in terms of the merits itself, yes, I think there is enough merit to bring this to case. It's not that there is a precedent. This hasn't really been seen in terms of suing the Department of Defense. This is something that's gone on for the past 20 years where military units have failed to do this. I think the bigger question is the standing that they have, because you're talking about three cities. This is Philadelphia, New York, and San Francisco, who are claiming that the Department of Defense is failing to do this, but the only example that they're bringing is the serviceman in Texas, that the Texas church shooting, which was a former Air Force person. So my question is, why aren't we seeing Texas cities? Where are the Texas authorities? Why don't they think this that this is a case that's worth bringing against the Department of Defense? You know, why aren't Texas authorities there? We haven't seen that going on. Whereas there has been a lot of scrutiny on Philadelphia and New York in particular, because you've had two terrorist attacks in the past month. One in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, over the last week was an actual terrorist attack against police officers. This person was not in the military. So it seems a little less like really caring about the failures of the Department of Defense and a little more like trying to shift blame from some of these city giants like Philadelphia and New York from their failures of state law enforcement against actual terrorist attacks to the Department of Defense for something that happened in Texas.
It's easy to you know, have hindsight and speculate here, and of course, hindsight, they say you have 20/20 vision. But I mean, could the massacre of the churchgoers in Texas, Sutherland Springs, the one you just mentioned, could that have been prevented? Could the impact have been less if that gunman, if Devin Kelley's earlier conviction had been reported to the FBI? He might have been prevented from purchasing those firearms or intercepted, detained. Could things have gone differently?
Absolutely. I think that these laws are in place. The laws that are in place, the laws that are in question now, are actually to prevent things like that happen with Devin Kelley in Texas. In fact, there was one local gun owner in Texas who refused to sell a firearm to Mr. Kelley just for reasons that were undisclosed. But there are loopholes still even in the laws. So, for example, even if every single military body and military personnel reported criminal convictions which landed in the gun register database, they still have what's called a gun show loophole. And in some states, if there's a gun show with private sellers, things like that, not all of them have to adhere, or they should, but not all of them adhere to federal gun database laws. So they won't look into those. So that's another loophole that's still problematic. But to answer your question, yes, these are the kinds of federal oversight programs that are supposed to prevent, especially some of our most highly trained military men and women from purchasing a firearm if they have a criminal conviction.
The Pentagon actually recently acknowledged, I believe, that it had failed to comply with requirements dating back to the 1990s, quite a while back. I mean, this is a question really of accountability, isn't it? Do you expect any officials, any senior officials, to be held account to over what's happened?
I believe so, but I think, we're seeing a lot, especially in the last decade, we're seeing a lot of trying to shift the blame to other things. And so we really need to see our administration, and I think you're seeing this now. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has been calling on the ATF Bureau, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, to work more closely with the FBI and other local law enforcement agencies. But really, we're going to have to see people stand up and say, look, there's going to be oversight. You're going to lose your jobs if you don't comply with federal laws. We have to see more of that from the top down, and we have to see more compliance between different agencies and local law enforcement, rather than holding on to information and not passing it out.
All right, thanks for that, Jennifer. Jennifer Breeden, international criminal law attorney and terror expert. Thanks for your insight today on that story.